So far, we've talked about how to store values within variables, and we've talked about the importance of using descriptive variable names, but we haven't yet talked about the rules that govern the naming of variables. Pretty much, you can't name a variable absolutely anything you want. In Python, variable names can only be composed of the following characters: uppercase letters, A through Z, lowercase letters, also A through Z, numbers, the digits 0 through 9, and last but not least, underscores. Take a second to find the underscore symbol on your keyboard. You can type an underscore by holding Shift and then pressing the subtraction key, right in between 0 and the plus sign on most keyboards. On top of that, there's one extra restriction, that you cannot start a variable name with a number, one of the digits, 0 through 9. You can only start a variable name with letters and underscores. To reinforce that, let's look at some examples. Which of the following are legal variable names in Python? Take a look through them, and we'll go over them one by one. First, my-name. It looks natural, however, dashes are not allowed in variable names. If Python looks at this, it's actually going to think that the dash is a subtraction symbol, and it's going to try and subtract name from my, and it's not going to be able to do it, unless you happen to have two other variables called my and name that actually exist in your notebook, and they both have numeric values stored to them. In that case, it would actually just do the subtraction, but we don't want that. All that sounds bad. You cannot use dashes in variable names. Next, the variable Ryan with an uppercase R. That's a good variable name. You can use both uppercase and lowercase letters in variable names. How about 90_days? This one doesn't work. There aren't any legal characters in this one, but you cannot start a variable name with a number, in this case, 9. The next two, we'll kind of talk about them together. _internal. It looks good. It only contains letters and underscores, and it doesn't start with a number. It might be a little bit odd to you that we could start a variable name with an underscore, but it is a legal variable name. Also in that same vein, an underscore by itself is also a legal variable name. Kind of weird. It's not a very descriptive variable name, but technically it works. And there might be some rare circumstances where you would want to do something like that. We may talk about that in later lessons. Okay, the last one. Asterisk or star pointer. Not allowed, even though this would be allowed in some other programming languages. Asterisks are not allowed in variable names, or really any other special character or symbol is not allowed. Only underscores, letters, and numbers. Now that that has maybe sunk in a little bit, let's try this again. I'm going to make this list a little bit trickier. Maybe not harder, but trickier. Which of the following are legal variable names in Python? This is kind of a trick question. Sorry to do that to you, but technically all of these are acceptable variable names in Python. Maybe not good variable names, but they are legal variable names. What I want to emphasize here is that Python will see all of these as different variables. Variables are case sensitive in Python. So temz with a lowercase t and temz with an uppercase t are two different variables. And I'm sure you'll run into this issue once in a blue moon when you accidentally make something uppercase which shouldn't be, or lowercase when it shouldn't be, and Python will throw an error saying that the variable name you're trying to use is not defined, or something like that. So watch out for that. I wanted to make sure that you know that variable names are case sensitive in Python. Before we wrap up this topic, there's one more variable naming restriction that I want to tell you about. Python is known for being a really readable programming language. In fact, that's one of its great strengths. Part of what makes Python so readable is that in certain situations where other programming languages might use a funky symbol to do something, Python tends to use regular words. I mean, what a concept, right? Like this, you should be happy about this. This is going to make our lives easier. The thing is, this poses a slight complication for what we name our variables. The following are what are called reserved keywords in Python. This means that the programming language has already laid claim to all of these words and has assigned to them specific functionality within the programming language. Because of this, you cannot use any reserved keywords as variable names. Python has a monopoly on all of them. Technically, you could change the casing of some of these in order to create a variable that doesn't conflict. However, I do not recommend that. As you get more experience, you'll start to recognize these keywords at a glance, and it will be confusing to other people if you use these words kind of at all as variable names. So I recommend that you just stay away from them entirely. Another thing that I want to mention is that you absolutely do not need to memorize this list at all. Don't be overwhelmed by it. In fact, there's a somewhat easy way to tell if you're accidentally using a reserved keyword in Python. In most code writing applications, when you type one of these reserved keywords, they will show up as either dark blue or purple when you write them. The application you're using to write your code probably has something called syntax highlighting. Syntax highlighting is how the application color codes the different parts of the programming language as you're writing the code. The more code you write, the more familiar you'll get with syntax highlighting. Speaking specifically to the syntax highlighting that is used in Google Colab and in Temzi Lessons, if you write a regular variable, it will be black in the case of Google Colab, or it will be light blue in the case of Temzi notebooks. However, in both of them, and in many other Python writing applications, if you accidentally use a reserved keyword, that reserved keyword will show up as either dark blue or purple. So the moral of the story is, if you're writing code and it goes funky colors, there's probably something off and you should try and double check your work. Specifically, with reserved keywords, remember that if it goes dark blue or purple, you're going to need to come up with a different variable name. The last thing I want to share with you is not a rule about naming variables, but is more what you call guidelines than actual rules. Wow, that's embarrassing, but I did it. All right. I want to encourage you to use something called snake case when naming your variables. That's S-N-A-K-E, like the animal, snake case. Using snake case means that all of the letters in our variable names are lowercase, and that if a variable is made up of multiple words, that we separate those words with underscores. Now, it's called snake case because if you squint hard, it kind of looks like the variable name is wiggling back and forth or up and down, kind of like you might see a snake do when it's moving. And in fact, there are other naming conventions out there that are used by other programming languages too. For example, something called camel case is common in JavaScript programming. In camel case, the first word is always lowercase, and then for each additional word, you make the first letter of that word uppercase. That's how they do it. You know what I mean? Doesn't this word look just like a camel? I mean, I guess the capital letters kind of do resemble the humps on a camel's back. Anyway, in Python, you should use snake case when naming your variables, and if you do, you'll fit right in with the rest of the Python community. Now, there are a few instances in Python programming where using snake case is not the convention, but do not worry about that for now. When in doubt, use snake case when naming your variables, and you'll be good 97.2% of the time. I made up that number, but it's probably close.